You're listening to Sox in the Basement, a production of the Broadcast Basement Limited, where every show is 30 minutes of good and comes from a basement bar on the south side of Chicago. Pull up a stool, pour a cold one, and join us right now for Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always at soxinthebasement.com.
Since we last spoke, Grady Sizemore got thrown out of a baseball game, and good for him, because I don't know if he'll ever be a major league manager after this season is over. I would put Grady in the minors, and I would give him an opportunity to start to figure things out, and maybe that's where his career is, and maybe down the line he does it again. But, you know, he had to be sitting there thinking to himself, I may never get a chance to do this again. Great gum throw. If you haven't seen the video, comes out, tosses the gum out of his mouth. He comes storming up. When you see the John Boy breakdown of the lip reading, though, I bet you he wishes he could have it back, because he didn't really win the argument. I would have liked to have seen him just eviscerate that umpire. That said, it was that moment that finally had the pot boil over with me and John Schriffen. Like, there's been some dumb things that have come out of that guy's mouth. There's been terrible coverage of events. There's been the way that they finally break that streak and he's screaming like they won the World Series. He doesn't seem to have a very good grasp of the rules of baseball or the flow of the game, and he's lucky that Steve Stone sits there and helps him out. He was clearly hired as a PR representative of the team to be rah-rah in the face of all bad. He's in the middle of a rough stretch. I don't know if you heard that quote the other day, how they're just in a rough stretch. And it's like, how long do you define a stretch as? Because it's been this season and maybe last season as well. A rough stretch. They're always running into the teams at the wrong time.
Some people might define a rough stretch as since your last championship 20 years ago.
All of that stuff is annoying. But during the Sizemore thing, it finally hit me why I don't like him. Because as he's yelling, not describing what's going on, yelling, it hit me. The thing that he's doing, which I will admit that I've done before as a young broadcaster. I want to tell you this story. My first job after college at the University of Illinois, where I had been a morning radio guy at WPGU, 107.1 The Planet, Champaign-Urbana's Modern Rock, 107.1 The Planet. And I was the top-rated morning guy, 18 to 34, 25 to 54. I had all the good demographics back then. I was a rock morning guy. I had an awful lot of fun. Ed was there. First, he was on my show. Then he became my boss and would pull his hair out as, you know, the mayor would show up and yell about me, and the police would try to arrest my stunt guy, and I was suspended for 2 weeks.
You always paint this picture that I was pulling my hair out at you. You do realize that I was the one sitting there going, Chris is Chris. He'll be fine. Like, that's why I took the job. I was just, you know, the shield.
Right. You were the shield, and you had to be a big shield at that time. And then I had like a 6-month break while I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go, and I had a bunch of job offers. And I was going to go someplace other than my hometown, much like John Schriffen. He's not from here. And I had to take a job that wasn't the exact format that I was used to. I was a rock morning radio guy, and the best offer out there with the best company that was available was like a top 40 station that was playing in sync in Wheeling, West Virginia. So here I am, I'm a Southside Chicago guy. I'm going to Wheeling, West Virginia. And I show up 6 months after I've used a microphone last. And the program director at the time, as I'm getting the show together and getting ready to take over mornings, in that first week says, you know, you really should go in and learn the equipment. If you want to, come in the middle of the night and work. And just introduce some songs and get used to hitting the buttons so that you're ready to go. And I said, that's probably a really good idea so that I can practice and be ready. So I go in at midnight for a couple nights in a row. And I don't want to use my regular voice because I have a cockiness about me. I have this thing where it's like, well, eventually I'm going to be number one in this town, which I ended up being. But I'm going to be number one in this town, and I don't want to start off being the guy that was on in the middle of the night. That's beneath me. That's how I felt at that age, at 22 years old. Okay, I was a little bit too big for my britches. So I get in there, and I'm going to introduce songs, but I don't want to be me, and I don't want to call myself by my real name. So I come up with a fake name. And I'm in West Virginia, so all of a sudden I start drawling like this. And I start talking about anything that's country. And I start making fun of things and Yanks. And I start treating them like they're the dumbest people on earth because my opinion of them was that they were dumb hillbillies from West Virginia. That's what I thought. Just a bunch of dumb hillbillies. They're into drinking moonshine in the hills. And yeah, that did appeal to the lowest common denominator. Of the people listening to that radio station that late at night, there were some that called up like, gee, Chris, or whatever I was calling myself, Jim Bob. Gee, Jim Bob, you're the funniest DJ. Welcome out to West Virginia. And they'd be all excited, and I'd be hooting and hollering with them and everything else like that. Because I had this stereotype of them, of what they were because of where they were geographically located. They were beneath me. They were dumb. When I listen to John Schriffen go into that weird accent when there's something exciting going on, where he's like, we ain't taking that. That's not what we do down here on the South Side. And he starts like doing that accent that isn't real. It's the same thing. Now, I was 22 and I was wrong. And I learned as I got older that that's not how you treat people. And that's the wrong way to address an audience. He hasn't figured that out yet. What I decided is the thing that bothers me the most about him is his opinion of Southsiders, that you're a bunch of mushmouths who want to go fight. So when something exciting happens, he starts shouting because he thinks you'll get behind him. And he appeals to the lowest common denominator because you're a bunch of dumb Southside Chicagoans in the middle of the Midwest. And this is what you are, and this is what you'll fall for. It hit me when I was watching that Grady Sizemore ejection, the way he was hooting and hollering during it. And then as I think back to other moments where there was conflict on the field, think about it. He goes into a voice and he starts placating to a stereotype of what Southsiders are. And I think that's why people are turned off by him more than not understanding the game. Because it's why I have decided, even though there's an episode, go back and listen to it, where I was like, maybe they're all picking on him because he's from out of town and this is unfair. I don't think so anymore.
Yeah.
I now I have a real problem with him because it's finally clicked for me why he's so off-putting. And it's for the same reason I was off-putting back in 2000 in Wheeling, West Virginia, pretending I was Jim Bob and talking about shine.
Well, you know what? And I think you hit something there too, because what did we like about Jason Benetti? Was it that Jason Benetti was hysterical? Was it that Jason Benetti spun great tales about baseball? Was he Vin Scully, painting beautiful pictures of the game in your mind as he's speaking? No, Jason Benetti was a guy who understood what White Sox fans are. We're a bunch of savvy people. We love baseball. We understand what it takes to win. We understand what it takes to lose, because we've seen enough of that. And we're not to be talked down to, right? And also Benetti, being a local guy, understood that the stereotype outside the city of Chicago that we're a bunch of gangsters and thugs and all we do is shoot at each other, yell at each other, and talk like the guys on Chicago PD and Chicago Fire and all that stuff, where they've got the fake, exaggerated Dan Aykroyd accent from Blues Brothers. That's not what we are, right? And it does, I think, grate on people a lot more when you don't act like you understand the sophistication of the South Siders, of even the North Siders, honestly.
Even the stand-up thing, Ed, the South Side stand-up thing, when you put it in that prism, he's basically saying, like, stand up and we're fighting. It's us against everybody.
Oh, yeah.
But it's more of a, that's what we are. We're a bunch of brawling Southsiders, and we're dumb enough to fall for is just a bad stretch, too. Like, I'm starting to find it insulting when he does that. And I couldn't figure out what was so off-putting. I'm like, am I not giving this guy a chance? I've got to be one of the last people that have really come down on him. Because I understand what it's like to go into a town where you're not from there. Like when he screwed up the Vec thing, and it was like, well, he called him Veek. I was like, well, that was dumb. That's probably on his producer.
Well, yeah,
he's from out of town.
That's on. There's plenty of people that could have corrected him ahead of time.
Right. I mispronounced San Joaquin Valley the first time I was doing radio out in Bakersfield, California. Called it San Joaquin. Like,
oh no!
Somebody should have told me. I don't know. I don't see words like that on street signs when in Chicago. That's just not a common thing.
We don't have San Joaquin Boulevard here.
Yeah, we don't have one of those. So like I got it, and I was trying to make excuses. I can't do it anymore. Now I just find him insulting, and it really is in those moments when if you listen, he starts to gain an accent. He starts to change how he's talking. And it's like a caricature of a South Sider. It's a stereotype, and it's belittling. And it's bad enough that we have to listen to him tell us that this team isn't that bad, but that's belittling. And I think that's the thing that finally convinced me. Like I just don't like him. Maybe it changes. Now, unfortunately, we're probably gonna have to put up with him next year because this is the kind of team that just digs in, man. You tell them you hate something, they go, we're going to give you twice as much.
Easily.
We're going to put him everywhere, and he's going to ramp up the style that he's doing. That's how they react. They hate people that tell them they don't like what they're doing, so they're going to double down on it. Guaranteed.
Exactly.
But at this point, I'm kind of done. Sox in the Basement listeners, if you're looking for new exterior windows, doors, patio doors, and storm doors, look no further than Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. They're not traveling salespeople like our play-by-play guy. No, they've been in Oak Forest since 1985, doing it this way for over 40 years with no high-pressure sales. Not in your kitchen, hanging out in your living room. You come to their showroom. Instead of looking at pictures in a book or little dingy example windows, see everything, every add-on right there in person. Owner in the showroom and on site with their own workers, they don't farm out the work at Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest with all major brands custom made and no stock items for a perfect fit. They are a half block east of 159th and Ridgeland at 6280 159th Street. Window and Door Superstore of Oak Forest. See more at windowdooroakforest.com.
So I've been thinking about Jerry, which is unfortunate for me. I know. I'm a glutton for punishment, but I've been thinking about Jerry, and I've been thinking about what Jerry has been doing, right? He clearly has some goals. He's asked the state for $2 billion to build up a stadium and an area around the stadium. He's buying his own TV network to try and raise better revenue there. And we have the long-standing thing of always finish in second place, always leave him wanting more. And I'm wondering if Jerry really understands, if he's a good enough businessman to understand like how he could get this done and actually make it better. And it would be beneficial to White Sox fans, but he's just going about it kind of the wrong way. And we know he's going about it the wrong way because we can see and hear and smell and taste everything that's going on around the White Sox, and it's all bad. But we were talking about John Schifrin, and we know that the White Sox are going to go to their own TV network, okay? And I did some hunting and looking around to see what kind of revenue he's getting off of his ownership in NBC Sports Chicago and how much it gave. And MLB Trade Rumors published this. The last known reported for all the teams was 2022. So in 2022, the White Sox made $60 million off of their revenue, off their television revenue, and that's what was reported. That tied them with the Reds and the Tigers. But it put them behind the Dodgers, Yankees, Angels, Phillies, Rangers, Braves, Mariners, Cubs, Red Sox, Giants, Mets, Cardinals, Astros, A's, and Diamondbacks. So they're towards the bottom of the list there. And the ones that are the most interesting there are the two that really own their own networks, okay? The Yankees have owned the YES Network forever, right? They control all the programming there. And the Mariners are now in control of Root Sports Northwest.
That's really interesting because I just read an article the other day. It was on CBS.com. Matt Snyder did a thing about billionaire owners, and he was trying to point out who's good, who's bad. He inexplicably did not spend enough time on Jerry Reinsdorf and focused on Bob Nutting out of Pittsburgh, but he talked about Hal Steinbrenner. $1.5 billion is what Steinbrenner's worth, and his team is worth $7.1. Forbes also had Reinsdorf at around $4 billion in his own net worth. So what's interesting is that Reinsdorf's worth more than Steinbrenner, at least according to this article, by a good margin. And yet the Yankees are worth more money because what Steinbrenner has done. And you could say, well, Steinbrenner's only worth this. Well, when he sells the Yankees, or if he ever were to do that, all of a sudden he's got an awful lot more money.
Oh, absolutely. But one of the things that you look at is how do you raise TV revenue as a station owner, right? And so one of the things I looked at, and this is where I wonder if Jerry Reinsdorf is smart enough to understand what he has. Because once upon a time, this regional network we had, when it was Comcast Sportsnet or NBC Sports Chicago or whatever it was, there was some actual programming on it, right? You remember they had Sports Night. They basically had a recap Sports Center style show. They had Beer Money was that quiz show that they would do where they'd go around and ask trivia questions and hand out some cash right on the spot. They had a staff of personalities that went beyond Chuck Garfien. And there was reasons to tune in when the White Sox weren't on or when they weren't just replaying a game. And they also, of course, have Blackhawks games in the offseason and Bulls. But I was looking at what the Mariners do with Root Sports. I was looking at what the YES Network does. They have actual programming. Like the Yes Network plays Premier League soccer games, like Manchester City, and there's another one that I can't remember right off the top of my head, but they play those games. And then they have Yankees programming. And then they have programming that surrounds the Premiership games. They have programming that surrounds the Yankees, like the history, like historical games and meeting with players. They had something called Top Step. They were interviewing a player. And then the Mariners have local college sports and other teams, other regional teams that they're covering, and it's original programming, right? So all day long, you can tune in and get some interesting sports. Do you know what NBC Sports Chicago plays most?
What do they play?
Paid programming.
It's stupid. They're not.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. They're not programming what they should be programming. Look at what Marquee is doing. And I only know about this because I got a kid that goes to Brother Rice High School on the south side.
Right.
Marquee is airing Brother Rice Marist, which is the Battle of Pulaski, on the Marquee
There
network.
you go.
And that's something that Jerry Reinsdorf should have on his network if he were really programming something. I mean, he owns the majority stakeholder in that, and he's going to own the majority stakeholder in anything else that he's creating here, right? So that's something he's really missing out on, because I talked about stereotypes of Southsiders. Here's one that's true. Southsiders love their high school sports.
Well, there you go.
It's the only place in the world of all the places that I've lived where people sit down and talk about football games or basketball games from 20 years ago and can rattle off the rosters and the head coach from some team that played on the South Side and had a magical season back in 1997. There's an untapped market in it, and Marquee's starting to figure it out. That right there should be on a Jerry Reinsdorf network. He also needs to get over himself and look at the programming that's being put together independently by White Sox podcast, even if he hates them.
And that's the thing. We exist. Okay, we don't exist in a vacuum, right? Our podcast, all the other podcasters that deal with the White Sox, part of the reason why we have the popularity we have, let's face it, is because outside of the pregame, the postgame, and the actual broadcast, there's very little White Sox programming because, again, NBC Sports Chicago, which, as you pointed out, Jerry owns half of.
We fill the void.
Right. There's no original programming. There's like World Series of Poker. They had something about like competitive tag on there, which actually was the one most interesting thing. I'm like, it's the Ocho in the middle of the day. But even I just looked up the Marquee Sports Network, the programming for today. It is all original Cubs programming. Even at 1 a.m, they're running something about Harry Carey. Even as a Sox fan, I'm sitting there, I'm like, you know what? Maybe I'd watch the thing about Harry Carey if I'm up at 1 a.m. What's NBC Sports Chicago going to run? A paid program about something.
Why are they doing that? Well, here's the thing. Here's what it strikes me as. It strikes me as a paid programming is money in the bank. You're running a sports network, and then in the off hours, somebody is paying you to run all their stuff on your show. And it's a short-sighted approach. It's a way of saying, okay, I own this station. It's going to air my games. I don't have to pay to have my games on the air. And I get all of the revenue from anything that is sold commercial advertising for my game. And then in all the other moments, I'm just going to sell to whoever wants to buy time on my network. It's very short-sighted because what you should be doing is saying, how do I build my fan base? How do I continue to connect with them? How do I get them so involved with the team they become like a rabid WWE wrestling fan who will sit around and watch 9, 10, 12 hours of programming and look at internet shows and everything else every week because they're keeping track of all the different wrestling superstars that are out there. And folks, that exists. And what the Yes Network is doing, what they're doing out in Seattle is saying, that exists. Marquee is starting to figure out that exists. And those are the people that are going to believe your message more likely than not. And if they don't believe your message, they're still going to watch because I would sit around and say, okay, I got nothing to do. I'm going to flip on some White Sox programming here. I'm going to see what the team is saying so I can talk about it on my show. And it gives me something else as a fan to digest. And there's a reason that this Sox podcast, after 6 years, brings in what it brings in. I say, I'm not giving out anybody's numbers here, but I've talked to the guys over at the 108. I've had conversations with other podcasters that are in this thing. We've all taken a little bit of a hit because of how bad the team is, right? Like there's a point where you lose just like, let's say 10%, maybe 15% of your listeners because they're so angry with the team they turn the thing off, right? But the rest of you are still there. I can look at my numbers right now and I can see it. The rest of you have been with us through this terrible thing. You're not at the ballpark, which is funny. Jerry lost you. We didn't.
The team didn't, and we didn't, but Jerry did. And it's about fan engagement. If I'm engaged as a fan, okay, let's talk about Andrew Vaughn, right? The guy that has been told to us by the team is a team leader and everything. If I had seen a half-hour show that Andrew Vaughn is just sitting there talking to Chuck Garfien, and it's played repeatedly to where, like, okay, it's not just a spring training thing or something like that, where I can see it, I might actually get to like Andrew Vaughn. And I might want to go see him play.
You follow him around. I mean, you don't need to put Chuck in everything. Chuck's in everything. You follow him around. You get other people that talk with him. You get him in looser environments. You bring him down here to a place like the 9-foot Homemade Oak Bar. You put him on with the 108 guys drinking someplace. You get them out there and you start showing that what they're doing. When they do something charitable, have a day where you follow them out there and you do like a half-hour thing about what they do with the kids out on one of these White Sox fields. I don't know who he's employing wrongly over there. Like who is the person that should be coming up with this? But whoever it is should be thrown out the door unless they've come up with these ideas and Jerry just doesn't want to do it because the short-sighted thing is just to sell the time.
That's what it is. And you know that's what it is because of how he treats the other things. I was looking at the stadium experience and honestly, the more engaged fans are on television and streaming and online, the more that likely they're going to come to the ballpark, right? And so one of the most simplest things, right? Look at Milwaukee. Milwaukee has, first of all, 33 million, half of what the White Sox made on TV for Brewers. But the Brewers, what's the big thing going to American Family Field up there, formerly Miller Park? It's the tailgating, right? It's a lovely stadium. I don't know if it's better than Guaranteed Rate Field, but it's tailgating. Well, the White Sox have that too. But it costs $10 less to park. And that doesn't seem like a big thing, but when it's almost $30 to park at a White Sox game,
you're less likely to tailgate. You're taking public transportation. You're taking away the personality of it. Let me tell you this real quick story. This is a true story, happened this week. My sister has a foreign exchange student coming in from Italy. Her son will then be going to Italy in the back half of the year, high school kids. And they're trying to find American things from the do. Like my sister's like, I'm thinking about taking him to Costco so we can just look at how ridiculous we are.
Yes, there you go. That's as American as you get.
Because you don't have stuff like that there in Italy. If you go to Italy, like it's like a corner shop, and you got to go to another corner shop for another item, and it's still really old world. So I'll take him to something like that. And then she was like, I think I want to take him to a baseball game because that's really American, but I don't want to take him to a Sox game because if he walks into a place that's got 3,000 people surrounded by a bunch of parking lots in the middle of the open, he's going to be like, what is this? He's going to be bored. He's going to hate baseball. She's like, and she's a diehard White Sox fan. And you know what she said? I think I'm going to take him to a Cubs game. I'm going to take him in there so he can see the neighborhood. I'm going to take him in there so he can experience the sights and the sounds. I'm going to take him in there so he can see what they have built up around the ballpark. And I'm going to take him in there because there's stuff going on inside of there. It is a very different experience. That was her honest take with somebody who's going to see baseball for the first time as a White Sox fan, because she's like, if I bring him to a Sox game, he's never going to want to look at baseball again. And he's going to think we're all terrible people. Like, who are these dumb Americans that spend all this money to walk into this lifeless place? And it's not to put down the fact that there aren't things going on there. I know there's tailgaters out there. I know people have events out there. We go to Cork and Carry at the park all the time, 33rd and Princeton in the shadow of the ballpark. You heard the ad at the beginning of the show. Our official sponsors, we love them there. And if you go out there, spend some money with them, get your food there. Bring the whole family in before the game. Have a good time after the game. It's always a party. I might hit there this weekend. But even with that, there's just not enough of it. The experience over in Wrigley is something completely different. And he had nothing but 40 years to make it better around there. And he could have taken one of those. He could have taken one of those parking lots. You're telling me this guy, he was able to get a free stadium. He was able to get a free stadium where they have to buy a certain amount of his tickets if he drops below 1.5 million in attendance, if I'm not mistaken. He gets guaranteed money in this sweetheart deal that he got when he got this new stadium. You're telling me he couldn't have turned around at some point and said, I'm going to take all the parking lot area that runs along those railroad tracks. I want to put an alley right there. Then I want to put buildings, and I want to put a row of them right down there. And I'm going to own all the shops. I'm going to sell things out of there. I'm going to have a museum there. I'm going to have bars there. I'm going to have nightlife there. I'm going to set the whole thing up. It spills out into where the parking lot is. That's what I'm going to go do. The Texas Rangers did that right around the time that he got his new stadium. And that's what the Rangers have. You go to Texas, they built a village. is what they did. He had every opportunity to do that. Now he's sitting around telling you he needs $2 billion in state dollars so he can do it now at 88 with everything that he's failed at over the last 40 years. That's the thing that, like, I know you're talking about this is what he should do, but I don't want to give him any money to do it, Ed. Like, in my mind now, if he in the offseason says I'm moving to Nashville, I'm going to say bye. On the phone with me right now, a guy who has not given up. He's just hanging in there all the way until the bitter end, putting all those amazing tidbits and trivia nuggets up on the scoreboard at the rate. The Sox nerd, Dave Marin, is here, and he's brought to you, as always, by the Village of Lamont. Want to experience a downtown with real history, great eats and drinks, and green spaces filled with adventure? Visit the Village of Lamont. Shop, dine, drink, explore. This weekend is the Taste of Lamont, and in 2 Saturdays, on the 21st, Sox in the Basement out at Pollyanna's Oktoberfest at the Forge in Lamont. See everything they have going on in Lamont this weekend and beyond at lamontdowntown.com. Nerd, what do you got for me this week?
Chris, Travis Jankowski made an amazing catch against the White Sox on August 28th at Guaranteed Rate Field. His home run saving grab over the left field wall robbed Andrew Vaughn of a walk-off homer and doomed the Sox to a 3-1 loss to Texas in the second game of a doubleheader sweep. The hubbub around that catch was that it was the greatest catch of all time, or the greatest catch people had ever seen, or the best catch of the season. While it was an amazing snare and prompted as much noise in the scoreboard room as any play in recent memory, I think we should pump the brakes on this one. In fact, I say it's not even the best catch in that park. That honor goes to Dwayne Wise, whose juggling grab after he slammed into the wall preserved Mark Burley's perfect game of July 23rd, 2009 against Tampa Bay. Besides its unabashed greatness, 3 things stand out to me about Wise's grab. Number 1, Wise was a 9th-inning defensive replacement. Manager Ozzie Guillen put him in center, moved Scotty Pod to the left, and removed Carlos Quentin from the game in what you would call a Wise move. Ha ha. Number 2, the play was responsible for my most viewed tweet, and it didn't even come during baseball season. While the NFL was trying to figure out a reception during a playoff game in 2018, I tweeted out a picture of the Wise play with the words, "Hey NFL, this is how you complete a catch." For some reason that resonated, and it has currently been seen by close to 50,000 people. Number 3, that play scared the heck out of me. As that batter, Gabe Kapler, was coming to the plate, I was frantically scrolling through my evergreen stats looking for a graphic to display. I paused when I saw a stat that read, quote, "broke up the Padres' Chris Young's perfect game with a leadoff homer in the 8th for Milwaukee on September 7th, 2008. Yikes, jinx alert. In the objective world, it was a perfect stat. In my world, however, it would have caused quite the ruckus. I'm glad I never found out how intense that ruckus would have been in the superstitious world of baseball. A catch I wish I'd witnessed was Juan Uribe's diving stab into the stands in the 9th inning of Game 4 of the 2005 World Series in Houston. That catch is one of the most overlooked and underrated in MLB history, and certainly as good or better than the comparable one Derek Jeter once made. Before I get to my zinger, a reminder, you can access my blog at soxinthebasement.com, and there is plenty of Sox Nerd material on Twitter and on the scoreboard at Guaranteed Rate Field. My zinger? Well, my zinger last week kind of blew up in my face as Baseball Reference altered its rookie status rules, so Corey Lee is no longer the most prolific home run hitting rookie catcher in Sox history. It's now Ed Herman and Bill Naharodny. I reached out to Baseball Reference about that one, and I will let you know what they say if they get back to me. Moving on. When Dominic Fletcher went deep on Wednesday in Baltimore, he became the first player measuring 5'6" to homer for the Sox since Walt No-Neck Williams cleared the fence on July 12, 1972. No player shorter than 5'6" has ever homered for the Sox. If you are wondering, Harry Chappis, the Sox most famous shorty, was 5'7". That's it, Chris. More than you probably wanted to know about Jankowski, Wise, Kapler, Uribe, and short guys.
The Kapler stat was incredible. I can't believe that you found that right before he almost hit a home run. And yes, Juan Uribe's catch was much better than Derek Jeter's.
I agree with you. And that when I saw that Kapler stat, I got really scared. And luckily, I didn't put it up on the board, or I might not have been talking to you today.
I feel like any White Sox fan, not just us, any White Sox fan could walk in today, get 15 minutes, and rattle off and explain 15 great ideas that they should do immediately that would make them more money. No matter how bad the team is. I think White Sox fans could walk in right now and say, what are you doing? It's been so obvious for so long. Get this done. Even if it's something crazy, like naturally it's happened. I remember when the stadium opened up, my dad had one of the great ideas. He looked at that concourse on opening day, first game ever in that ballpark when it was just a mall and everything was blue and concrete. And he looks out at that concourse and he goes, you know what they should do? They should build a bar all the way around that concourse.
Yes.
Bring up bar stools.
Yes.
And just make it open seating. It'd be one of the coolest things in baseball.
That's one of the things, he says better at the ballpark. So I'm reading a blog called The Stadium Journey. And these guys have been to all the ballparks. And here's the thing. They actually like guaranteed rate field. They love the food. They think White Sox fans are great. They understand our frustration. There's a lot to like about it. The neighborhood around it, they said there's just nothing to do, and they rattled off a few places that are in the area that you kind of have to get to. And that lowered the scores there. But one of the things I noticed about like them versus say Colorado, where Colorado, they built Coors Field in the middle of like one of the best parts of downtown Denver. You're not going to be able to do that with the White Sox. But one of the things that they did, for example, is they've got this whole party level that anybody with any ticket can get to, right? It's first come, first serve. And you go there and you can sit there and you can spend the entire game there. And sometimes it's standing room only, but they said it's like the best spot in the ballpark. But anybody can go there. It doesn't matter if you've got the tickets that are at the purple row in Coors Field where it's a mile above sea level, or if you're paying $120 for one of the box seats. Anybody can go and party. And that's what's missing, right? Because you and I went to a game where we had to go to that club that's off in the corner, and you have to pay extra to get in there, and you only have to have a certain type of ticket to get in there. And then you had to pay for the food in there, which is a little bit more expensive than what's on the concourse in some cases.
The Huntington Club, which I thought was a bad experience.
Exactly.
You know what I'd rather do with my entertainment dollar? Go to the other corner into the thing that, like, I know it was the Revolution Club. Now it's another. They just sell it to whatever.
It used to be Goose Island,
right?
Yeah.
But it's in the corner over there, down the third base line, and it's sitting at around where the 300 level would be or 200 level would be, where you can come up the stairs off the concourse and walk into it. And it's 21 and over. How are they not walking around the ballpark and understanding the first thing that everybody flocks to? Is they're like, instead of sitting in my seats, I'm going to go sit in that open seating at a high table overlooking the stadium. Instead of sitting in my seats, right. I'm going to go find that little open space where the Goose Island section used to be. Instead of sitting in my seating, if there isn't anybody at the fan deck, that is a great seat when they have it open and they haven't sold it, and they let you come up there and sit there. And look on the most empty days at that ballpark, people go buy their beer and stand at the little tables on the concourse and watch the game. They're shoulder to shoulder. Again, where the bar could have been that Dad came up with 30 years ago. 15 minutes, Ed.
15 minutes.
15 great ideas with explanations from every White Sox fan if they would just open their ears.
Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement. Sox in the basement.
Sox in the Basement. Heard everywhere podcasts can be found, and always on soxinthebasement.com.